The bodies were arranged. Not left, not discarded, arranged. Every detail deliberate, every angle considered, the position of the hands, the direction the face looked, the distance between the figures. Even in death there was composition, even in violence there was intention. The investigators who arrived at these scenes did not use the word murder. Not at first. They stood in silence, and they looked. And then, one by one, they found the word they had been trying to avoid. Art. Someone was making art. From the bodies of the dead. His name was Jhin. And the people who searched for him for 4 years could not decide whether finding him would be a relief or a loss. Subscribe if you are new. A new League of Legends story every week. This one is unlike any other. For years, the southern mountains of Ionia lived in shadow. Not the metaphorical kind. The specific, daily, practical shadow of knowing that something was out there. That travelers who took certain roads did not arrive. That farms fell silent without explanation. That what was left behind, when anything was left behind, was impossible to look at for long. Armed militias searched the forests. Monster hunters were hired from distant cities. Wuzhu swordmasters patrolled the roads. None of it stopped what was happening. The Jhin Council, out of options, sent a message to Grand Master Kusho. They begged for his help. Kusho declined. He gave a reason. The reason was a lie. 1 week later, he arrived in Jhin with 2 people, his son Shen, and his most gifted student, a young man who would one day be called Zed. They came as merchants, unrecognized, unremarkable. 3 men who looked like they were passing through, looking for goods to trade, having the ordinary conversations of people in transit. They moved through the region without announcing what they were. They spoke with the families. The ones who had lost someone, the ones who had arrived at a scene and had to decide how to go on after seeing it, the ones who could not stop seeing it, even years later, even when they were doing something entirely different. Kusho asked careful questions. He listened more than he spoke. He let the grief move through the room before he asked anything else. Shen recorded. Zed watched. They examined the locations. They built a picture of what had happened. Piece by piece, connection by connection. They searched for a pattern, not in the violence itself, in the choices behind it, in the decisions that had produced each specific scene. The investigation lasted 4 years. 4 years in the presence of what someone was capable of. 4 years of interviews with people whose grief was still raw. 4 years of standing in places where terrible things had happened and asking why they had happened this way and not some other way. 4 years of carrying a question that had no comfortable answer. Why this? Why this arrangement? Why this scene and not a simpler one? Why so much care? Why so much intention? The question that lived under all the other questions. Why does this look like something someone was proud of? It changed all 3 of them. Kusho's famous red hair went white. Shen, who had been known for his sharp wit, stopped speaking unless necessary. Zed, the most brilliant student at the temple, began to struggle with his lessons. The darkness had found its way in. Not into their actions, into their understanding. Into the specific, quiet horror of having seen too clearly what was possible. When they finally found the pattern, Kusho made a statement that was later passed between Tachit Perfi Barka Pachakate. Those who heard it, he said, good and evil are not carved in stone. Both come from individuals. What one calls good another calls evil. The people present at the time did not know how to take this. They found out later. The Golden Demon. The name had spread across Ionia for years. Something monstrous, something supernatural, something that could not be human, because no human was capable of this. Kusho had decided differently. He believed the killer was a person. A specific, findable, ordinary person, who had been making a choice, repeatedly, over years. At the spring festival at Jhin Pass, Kusho disguised himself as a calligrapher, one craftsman among many, unremarkable, waiting. He was right. He was always right. The Golden Demon was there. His name was Kada Jhin. He worked backstage at the traveling theaters and operas of Jhin. He had spent years moving through the region. An invisible presence. Someone whose job was to make other people's performances possible. Someone who stood in the dark at the edge of the stage. And who, in the spaces between those performances, had been making his own. When they took him, Zed moved immediately. He wanted to end it there. He had spent 4 years living inside what this person had done. He had the right. Kusho stopped him, not with force, with certainty. Jhin would go to Tula prison, not death, containment. The master's reasoning was what it always was: patience, process, the long view. The belief that a system of justice required adherence even in the most difficult cases. Especially in the most difficult cases. Shen disagreed with the decision. He kept his disagreement private. He trusted his father's logic even when he could not fully accept it. The logic was coherent, within its own framework. Shen could follow the argument. He just could not make himself feel that the argument was adequate. Zed could not accept it at all. He had seen what Jhin had made. He had stood in those places. 4 years of standing in those places. 4 years of looking at what one person had decided to create. He had seen the faces of the people who were left behind. And now the man responsible was going to a prison, not to answer for anything, not to face what he had done. Just to be held, alive, fed, taught, treated with the courtesy that Kusho believed every living person deserved. Something broke in Zed that day. Not loudly, quietly. The way things break when they have been under pressure for a long time, and the final weight is Baccadia. Smaller than expected. At Tula, Jhin was notable for his gentleness, his courtesy, his patience. The monks who worked there recognized his extraordinary gifts quickly. He was a skilled student of blacksmithing, of poetry, of dance, of every craft they offered access to. He was the kind of student who made teachers feel that they were doing important work, who absorbed what was given and made it look natural, who seemed to genuinely enjoy learning, who was, in every observable dimension, a model of what rehabilitation was supposed to look. Praj-like he gave them nothing about himself. No explanation, no confession, no window into whatever was behind the careful, pleasant surface. Every question that got too close was deflected. Not with hostility, with something more effective than hostility. With warmth. With a redirect so smooth and natural that the person asking often did not realize they had been gohun, redirected. He would not be understood. Not by force. Not by study. Not by the kind of patient professional attention that Tula offered. He simply existed there. Quiet and perfectly contained. Waiting. Outside the prison walls, Ionia was changing. The Noxian occupation had torn the country apart. The political stability that had held for generations was gone. Factions formed. Alliances were made in shadows. People who had grievances about the old order saw their opportunity in the chaos. Among them, certain council members. People who had decided that the influence of the Wuju swordmasters and the ninja orders had gone on long enough. Who had decided that the best instrument for reducing that influence was already sitting in a cell. At Tula, they moved quickly once they had decided. Jhin walked out of prison, with weapons from the Kashuri armories. with funding that had no visible source, with the freedom to work at a scale that had not been available to him before. He did not waste it. The work he produced reached into the highest levels of Ionian politics, into the spaces where foreign diplomats negotiated, into the underground networks that operated beneath the official story of the country. He made himself felt. Not seen, not known. Felt. The specific haunting awareness that something had been placed, that someone had made a choice, that the composition was complete. And somewhere in the audience, someone was supposed to notice. He needed to be seen. This was the part that the darkness could not contain forever. The part that a cell had held down. The part that resources and freedom had now unlocked. He had spent years working in the shadows. He had spent years as the invisible hand behind other people's performances. He knew what a performance looked like from that angle. He knew the difference between the thing the audience saw and the thing that made it possible. He had spent his life on the wrong side of that difference. He was tired of the dark. He wanted the stage. He wanted the audience. He wanted the recognition that the violence of Jhin had always been reaching toward. He had been making something. For years. With extraordinary care and extraordinary cost. And barely anyone had understood it as something made. They had called it evil. They had called it a demon. They had called it anything except what it was. Art. He wanted the audience to understand. Now he had the means to demand that understanding. The question that no one in Ionia's intelligence networks could quite answer was simple. How long would a man who needed to be seen be satisfied with an audience that did not know his name? If this story stayed with you, subscribe. Every week, a new League of Legends story. The ones that ask the questions you cannot answer.